My name is Jennifer Wilson, and at 67 years old, I never expected to be making such a difficult decision about my family. For 12 years, I carefully built college funds for my grandchildren Emma and Ethan. Their father Brian always seemed ambitious but respectful, at least until recently. Everything changed with a dinner invitation that arrived in my mailbox last month. The card was formal, the handwriting unfamiliar, but I had no idea it would lead to the most painful night of my life. Before I tell you what happened that night, let me know where you are watching from. Give this video a like if you have ever had to make a difficult family decision, and subscribe to join our community of life experience sharers. To understand what happened, you need to know a bit about our family. I dedicated 40 years of my life to education, retiring as principal of Riverside Elementary 7 years ago. Around the same time, my husband Robert passed away after a brief battle with cancer. We had been married for 39 years, and suddenly I found myself alone in our family home, the one we had purchased when our daughter Melissa was just 3 years old. Melissa was our only child, and after Robert died, she became my world. She had always been independent and strong-willed qualities Robert and I had encouraged. We wanted her to stand on her own 2 feet, make her own decisions, and forge her own path. After high school, she attended State University with a partial scholarship. I worked extra hours supervising after-school programs to help cover the remaining tuition costs. Robert and I were so proud when she graduated with honors in business administration. Her early career had its struggles. She worked 3 different jobs in 5 years, trying to find her footing in the corporate world. During that time, she lived in our basement apartment to save money. I still remember our Sunday brunches, how we would sit for hours discussing her career aspirations and the challenges she faced in male-dominated business environments. I always encouraged her to stand her ground and never settle for less than she deserved. Then she met Brian Thomas at a networking event. He was 32, 4 years older than Melissa, and worked as a financial advisor for a prestigious firm. When she first brought him home, I was impressed by his politeness and the way he seemed to genuinely care about Melissa. He complimented my cooking, asked about my work in education, and even helped with the dishes without being asked. Robert had been gone for just over a year by then, and I remember thinking how he would have approved of this young man. Their courtship was brief. Within 6 months, Brian proposed, and they were married 3 months later in a lavish ceremony that seemed a bit extravagant to me, but I kept my concerns to myself. It was their day after all. Looking back, I should have noticed the early warning signs, how Brian gently but firmly corrected Melissa about small things, how he made decisions about their wedding without consulting her, how he spoke about people from his past who had held him back. Emma was born a year after their wedding, and Ethan followed 2 years later. My grandchildren quickly became the center of my world. Emma has always been thoughtful and artistic with a talent for drawing that reminds me of Robert. She is quiet but observant, taking everything in with her serious brown eyes. Ethan is more outgoing, always full of energy and questions. He loves sports and science experiments, often calling me to describe his latest discovery or achievement. From the moment each of them was born, I knew I wanted to secure their futures. Having spent my life in education, I understood the importance of college and how prohibitively expensive it had become. When Emma was born, I set up a college fund with the money Robert and I had saved for retirement. Each month I added to both accounts, watching them grow steadily over the years. By the time Emma turned 12 and Ethan 10, their funds had accumulated to substantial amounts. Education has always been the cornerstone of success in our family. My parents sacrificed to put me through college, and Robert and I did the same for Melissa. I wanted to continue that legacy for my grandchildren. I never mentioned the exact amounts to Brian or Melissa, though they knew the funds existed. I wanted it to be a surprise when the time came, a gift that would open doors for Emma and Ethan without the burden of student loans that so many young people face today. For the first few years after the children were born, our family dynamic seemed healthy. Melissa and Brian would bring the children to visit every weekend. We would have Saturday dinners together, and sometimes they would stay overnight. I cherished those moments, reading bedtime stories to my grandchildren, making pancakes shaped like animals on Sunday mornings, and watching them play in the backyard where their mother once played. But things began to change as Brian's career advanced. The weekend visits became monthly, then occasional. Brian started controlling the conversations during family gatherings, steering topics toward his work accomplishments or their plans for home renovations. Melissa spoke less in these gatherings, often looking to Brian before offering her opinion on even the most trivial matters. I tried to maintain our connection despite the growing distance. I volunteered to babysit whenever they needed it. I attended every school performance and sports game. I sent thoughtful gifts for birthdays and holidays. I never criticized their parenting decisions even when I disagreed with them. I believed that being supportive and present was the best way to remain in my grandchildren's lives. Despite my efforts, I could feel them slipping away. Each visit seemed more formal, less comfortable. The children still ran to hug me when they saw me, but I noticed how quickly Brian would interrupt their excited stories to remind them about manners or schedules. Still, I held on to hope that this was just a phase, that as the children grew older, our relationship would find its natural balance again. Over the past year, the tension in our family gatherings became impossible to ignore. Brian had received a significant promotion at his firm, becoming one of the youngest senior partners in their history. With this new position came a substantial increase in income, and it seemed a shift in priorities. Suddenly, everything in their lives needed to be upgraded. They moved from their comfortable four-bedroom house in our suburban neighborhood to a mansion in Lakeside Estates, the most exclusive community in our city. Their two practical family cars were replaced by a luxury SUV for Melissa and a European sports car for Brian. The children were withdrawn from the public school where I had once worked and enrolled in private tutoring programs until spots opened at Westfield Academy, a prestigious private school with a $30,000 annual tuition per Planks child. Brian began dropping names of important clients and business associates in every conversation. Weekend family dinners were replaced by charity galas and networking events. When I did see them, Brian would dominate the conversation with stories about their country club membership or the celebrities they had met at fundraisers. What troubled me most was how Melissa had begun to echo these attitudes. My daughter, who once volunteered at homeless shelters and donated to environmental causes, now spoke dismissively about people who lacked ambition or made poor life choices. She became obsessed with appearances, criticizing my comfortable clothing and suggesting I update my hairstyle to look more current. The children were being pushed into activities that seemed designed more for status than enjoyment. Emma, who loved art and creative writing, was now enrolled in competitive tennis and French lessons. Ethan, who had enjoyed community soccer and building model rockets, was now taking private golf lessons and attending etiquette classes. When I asked them about these activities during our increasingly rare visits, they responded with rehearsed enthusiasm that never quite reached their eyes. Our family traditions gradually disappeared. The annual summer camping trip to Lake Superior was replaced by a vacation to exclusive resorts in Europe. Our Christmas cookie baking day was canceled because the children had a photo shoot for custom holiday cards. Thanksgiving dinner at my house became too much trouble when they could have it catered at their new home. I tried not to take these changes personally. I reminded myself that families evolve, that success often brings new opportunities and connections. But I could not shake the feeling that something fundamental was being lost in this transformation. Something more valuable than all the material upgrades and social climbing. Then came the dinner invitation. It arrived in an expensive cream-colored envelope with my name written in calligraphy. Inside was a card inviting me to dinner at Brian and Melissa's home on Saturday at 7. The formality of it struck me as odd. In the past, Melissa would have simply called to invite me over, but I saw it as an opportunity to reconnect, perhaps to bridge the growing gap between us. I prepared for the dinner with hopeful anticipation. I bought new clothes, a simple but elegant outfit that I thought would meet with their approval. I had my hair styled at the salon downtown. I purchased thoughtful gifts for the children, a professional sketchbook for Emma and a beginner astronomy kit for Ethan, trying to encourage the interest they had shown before the big changes. As I drove to their new neighborhood, I rehearsed positive topics of conversation. I would ask about their recent vacation without mentioning its extravagance. I would compliment the new house without comparing it to their previous one. I would express interest in Brian's work without questioning the long hours he spent away from the family. I was determined to be the supportive mother and grandmother they needed, even if their new lifestyle felt foreign to me. The Lakeside Estates gate attendant checked my name against a list before allowing me to enter. The houses were enormous, set far back from the winding roads on perfectly manicured lawns. I found their address and pulled into a circular driveway larger than my entire front yard. The house was imposing with towering columns and massive windows that revealed glimpses of crystal chandeliers and modern artwork. My first disappointment came immediately. Instead of the warm family welcome, I had hoped for a uniformed housekeeper answered the door. She took my coat and led me through a marble-floored foyer into a formal living room where Brian stood mixing drinks at a built-in bar. Melissa was adjusting flowers in a massive arrangement, her back to me as I entered. The house was stunning but felt like a museum rather than a home. There were no family photos on the walls, only abstract paintings that Brian quickly informed me were by an emerging artist whose work is expected to triple in value within 5 years. The furniture looked expensive, but uncomfortable, with no signs of children living there. No toys, no books, no scattered shoes or backpacks. When Emma and Ethan finally appeared, they were dressed formally, as if for a photo shoot rather than a family dinner. They hugged me, but I noticed how they glanced at their father first, seeming to check if this display of affection was acceptable. When I presented my gifts, their excitement briefly broke through the formal facade. Emma clutched the sketchbook to her chest, and Ethan immediately began reading the back of the astronomy kit box. But Brian quickly interrupted, instructing the housekeeper to take the gifts to the children's rooms for later examination. As we moved to the dining room, I caught Emma whispering to me, "I miss you, Grandma," before Brian called her to her seat. That whispered confession gave me hope that beneath the polished exterior, my real grandchildren were still there, still longing for the simpler connections we once shared. The dining room looked like something from a luxury home magazine, with a table that could seat 20 people, though only 4 places were set at one end. Crystal glasses, fine china, and sterling silver flatware gleamed under an enormous chandelier. A second housekeeper appeared to serve the first course, a small plate of something unrecognizable garnished with edible flowers. "This is a deconstructed caprese salad with balsamic pearls," Brian announced, swirling his wine glass. "Chef Antoine trained in Paris before we convinced him to work exclusively for us." I nodded and tried the dish, which was delicious, despite its pretentious description. Throughout the first course, Brian dominated the conversation, detailing his recent business triumph securing a billionaire client who had chosen Brian's financial expertise over dozens of other advisors. Melissa nodded appreciatively at appropriate intervals, adding small comments like, "Tell Jennifer about the yacht, darling." I noticed they were referring to me by my first name, not as Mom or your mother as Melissa had always done. This subtle shift felt deliberate, a distancing technique that made me more of an acquaintance than family. The children remained silent, eating carefully, and maintaining perfect posture. As the main course arrived, Brian cleared his throat and looked directly at me for the first time that evening. "Jennifer, we wanted to share some exciting news with you. We have secured spots for both Emma and Ethan at Westfield Academy starting next semester." "That is the most exclusive private school in the state," Melissa added. "They normally have a 3-year waiting list, but Brian knows a board member." "That sounds impressive," I said carefully, looking at my grandchildren for their reaction. Both stared at their plates. "Are you both excited about the new school?" I asked them directly. Before either child could answer, Brian continued, "They will receive an education fitting their potential. The networking opportunities alone are invaluable. The children of senators, CEOs, and even a European princess attend Westfield." "I taught in public schools for 40 years, I said gently. "There are wonderful educational opportunities there too." Brian's smile tightened. "Yes, well, that was a different era, Jennifer. In today's global economy, the right connections are as important as the curriculum. Public education simply cannot provide the advantages we want for our children." I felt the dismissal of my entire career in his tone, but I maintained my composure. What subjects are you most looking forward to at the new school? I asked Emma and Ethan. Ethan opened his mouth to respond, but Brian answered for him. Ethan will be focusing on their advanced mathematics track and business fundamentals program. Emma will be in their international studies program with Mandarin Chinese. We've already hired tutors to prepare them over the summer. Speaking of summer, Melissa interjected, we should tell you about our plans. Brian nodded, clearly pleased with the subject change. We have rented a villa in the south of France for June. Then we will spend July at a leadership retreat in Switzerland, where the children will attend an international youth program while Melissa and I network with industry leaders. August will be split between Martha's Vineyard and a wellness resort in Arizona. My heart sank as I realized their entire summer was planned, without any time for visits with me. In previous years, the children had spent at least 2 weeks at my house. During summer vacation time, we filled with trips to the local pool, baking cookies, and backyard camping. That sounds like a busy schedule, I said, trying to keep disappointment from my voice. Will there be any time for them to visit me, perhaps between trips or before school starts? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Brian and Melissa exchanged a look that sent a chill through me. Actually, Jennifer, Brian said, setting down his fork with precision, that is part of what we wanted to discuss tonight. As we move into these new social and professional circles, we need to be mindful of how we present ourselves and our family. Melissa nodded, still not meeting my eyes. What Brian means is that appearances matter in these circles. I am not sure I understand, I said, though. A sick feeling was growing in my stomach. Brian straightened in his chair. To be blunt, Jennifer, your presence would not be welcome in many of the settings we now frequent. Your simple lifestyle, your outdated views, your entire presentation would be inconsistent with the image we need to maintain. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. Are you saying you are embarrassed by me? Not embarrassed, he said smoothly, simply aware of social realities. The parents at Westfield would find it difficult to relate to someone who spent their career in public education. Our new neighbors would have little in common with someone who lives in a modest suburban home and drives a 10-year-old car. Each word felt like a physical blow. I looked at Melissa, waiting for her to defend me, to object to this cruel assessment. She adjusted her napkin and said quietly, Mom, we are just trying to give the children every advantage. Surely you can understand that. By cutting me out of their lives, I asked, my voice finally betraying my hurt. Not cutting you out, Brian said, as if explaining something simple to a child. Just creating appropriate boundaries. Perhaps we could arrange occasional visits here, in a controlled environment. The conversation continued to deteriorate as Brian became more specific in his criticisms. He mentioned my matronly clothing style, my outdated hairstyle, even the way I spoke about politics and social issues as being potentially embarrassing in their new circles. He suggested that if I wanted to remain in their lives, I would need to undergo a complete makeover and extensive coaching on appropriate topics of conversation. Throughout this humiliating assessment, Melissa remained largely silent, occasionally nodding in agreement. I searched her face for any sign of the daughter I had, raised the young woman who had once valued authenticity and kindness above social climbing. I found no trace of that person. The children watched this exchange with wide eyes. Emma looked on the verge of tears while Ethan had gone completely still, his dinner untouched. When Brian mentioned that my excessive affection with the children was inappropriate for their age and social standing, I saw Emma's hand tighten around her water glass. Children need hugs and warmth, I said, finding my voice again. They need to know they are loved for who they are, not for what social doors they can open. That kind of sentimentality is exactly what we are trying to move beyond, Brian said dismissively. Emma and Ethan are being prepared for exceptional futures. They do not need coddling, they need guidance toward excellence. I could no longer maintain my composure. Placing my napkin beside my plate, I excused myself from the table. I need a moment, I said, my voice tight with unshed tears. As I left the dining room, I heard Ethan ask in a small voice, Dad, why are you being mean to Grandma? And Brian's sharp response, That is enough, Ethan. Finish your dinner. The drive home passed in a blur of tears and disbelief. I had to pull over twice because my vision was too clouded to continue safely. Each word Brian had spoken replayed in my mind, each silent moment where Melissa could have defended me, but chose not to. The betrayal cut deeper than any pain I had experienced since Robert's death. As I entered my empty house, memories flooded back of raising Melissa in these very rooms. I remembered her as a toddler taking her first steps across the living room floor, while Robert and I cheered her on. I thought of her teenage years, how we had weathered the storms of adolescence together after Robert's heart attack left him with mobility issues. I had worked 2 jobs then, teaching during the day and tutoring in the evenings to cover his medical bills while still saving for Melissa's college fund. When Robert died during Melissa's senior year of college, she had moved home for 3 months to help me through the initial grief. We had sat together sorting through his belongings, crying over old photographs, and sharing stories late into the night. Where was that daughter now? The one who had held my hand at the funeral and promised we would always be there for each other. Sleep eluded me that night. I pulled out old photo albums, tracing the history of our family through birthdays, holidays, and ordinary moments captured on film. There were so many pictures of Melissa and me together, our resemblance striking in some images. I found photos from the day Emma was born, my face alight with the joy of becoming a grandmother. There was Ethan's 3rd birthday party in our backyard, a simple celebration with homemade cake and balloons that had brought so much happiness. As I turned the pages, I began to notice a pattern. In the more recent photos, Brian was often positioned between Melissa and me, physically separating us. In group pictures, he would stand with his arm firmly around Melissa, slightly turned away from me. The children's expressions in these newer images were more reserved, their smiles seeming forced compared to the uninhibited joy of earlier years. I had missed these signs, or perhaps I had chosen to ignore them, hoping that the changes were temporary, that our family bond would ultimately prevail over superficial concerns. Now I saw clearly how Brian had been systematically isolating Melissa from me, reshaping her values to match his materialistic worldview, and by extension distancing my grandchildren as well. The next morning, red-eyed from crying and lack of sleep, I called Melissa. I needed to speak with her alone to try to reach the daughter I knew was still there somewhere beneath the polished exterior. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice cautious. "Mom, is everything okay?" "No, sweetheart, it is not," I said honestly. "Last night was very painful for me. I was hoping we could talk, just the 2 of us." "Brian and I are a team, Mom," she replied, the rehearsed quality of her response evident. "Anything you want to say to me, you can say to both of us." "Melissa, do you really agree with everything Brian said last night? About me not being welcome in your lives unless I change who I am?" There was a long pause, and I heard muffled voices in the background. Then Melissa spoke again, her tone firmer. "We are providing opportunities for our children that you cannot understand. Sometimes difficult decisions have to be made for their benefit." "Is it beneficial for them to be taught to reject people based on their income or social status?" I asked. "Is that really the value system you want to instill in Emma and Ethan?" "You are twisting everything," she said defensively. "This is not about rejection. It is about priorities and appropriate boundaries." In the background, I heard Brian's voice clearly. "Is that the old lady? Tell her we have a charity luncheon to attend. We do not have time for this drama." The casual cruelty of his dismissal, referring to me as the old lady, rather than by name or relation, was the final straw. I realized in that moment that no amount of discussion would break through the wall that had been built between us. Brian's influence had completely overshadowed the values I had spent a lifetime teaching my daughter. "I have to go, Mom," Melissa said, sounding relieved to end the conversation. "We will call you later in the week to discuss how to move forward." After hanging up, I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where our family had shared thousands of meals together, and I wept. Not just for myself and the rejection I had experienced, but for my grandchildren, who were being taught that people had value only if they contributed to social advancement. I cried for Melissa, who had surrendered her identity and values to become an accessory in Brian's climb up the social ladder. The weekend passed in a fog of grief. On Sunday afternoon, my sister Alice called for our weekly check-in. I had always downplayed the growing tensions with Melissa and Brian during these calls, not wanting to burden her with my problems. But today, the dam broke. I told her everything from the formal dinner invitation to the cruel dismissal of my place in their lives. Alice listened without interruption, then shared that her son-in-law had attempted something similar years ago, trying to distance her daughter from the family because of their middle-class background. But Janet stood up to him, Alice said. She told him that her family was non-negotiable. Eventually he accepted it, or at least he pretends to. Melissa did not stand up for me. I said the pain fresh again in the telling. She sat there while Brian insulted everything about me, everything I have ever been or done. And you have supported them in every way, Alice reminded me. Emotionally, practically, and from what you have told me financially as well with those college funds. Her words triggered a realization that had been forming in my subconscious. For years, I had been setting aside a significant portion of my retirement savings to build those college funds. I had made sacrifices living frugally and foregoing my own comforts to ensure my grandchildren would have educational opportunities. And now the parents of those same grandchildren had deemed me unworthy of a place in their lives. Why should my money be welcome when I am not? I asked Alice, a new clarity emerging through the pain. Exactly, she replied. You are not an ATM, Jennifer. You are a person deserving of respect and appreciation. If they cannot give you that, why should you give them anything? By Sunday evening, a sense of calm had replaced my initial hurt and anger. I realized I needed to make a decision about the college funds, not out of vengeance, but out of self-respect and a recognition of unhealthy family dynamics. My money should not enable a value system that I fundamentally opposed, one that judged human worth by social status and material possessions. Monday morning, I began researching the legal aspects of the college funds I had established. These were not formal trusts or 529 plans, but rather investment accounts I had set up in my name, with the intention of using them for Emma and Ethan's education. Legally, the money remained mine, though morally I had always considered it earmarked for my grandchildren. I contacted my financial advisor, James, who had helped me establish the accounts 12 years ago. He agreed to meet me that afternoon to discuss my options. His office was comfortingly familiar with the same framed sailing photographs on the walls that had been there when Robert and I first sought his advice for our retirement planning. I understand this is a difficult situation, James said after I explained the circumstances. From a purely financial perspective, these funds remain entirely under your control. You have the legal right to redirect them as you see fit. I never thought I would consider using this money for anything other than their education, I admitted. But I cannot in good conscience continue to support a family system that has explicitly rejected me unless I change everything about myself. James nodded sympathetically. May I ask what you are considering doing with the funds? I want to set aside a smaller amount in truly restricted accounts that can only be used for educational expenses when Emma and Ethan reach college age, I explained. The rest I will reclaim for my own security and perhaps to support causes that align with my values. The next morning I walked into my local bank with a sense of determination I had not felt in years. The branch manager, Sophia, had known me for over a decade and greeted me warmly. When I explained what I needed to do, she looked surprised, but did not question my decision. We will need to complete quite a bit of paperwork, she explained, leading me to her private office. Since these are significant sums, there will be forms to verify the transfers and new account applications to complete. For the next 2 hours, I signed document after document, transferring funds from the original investment accounts into new arrangements. With each signature, I felt a mixture of sadness and resolve. This was not the outcome I had ever envisioned when I started saving for my grandchildren, but it was necessary to protect my own emotional and financial well-being. Are you sure about this decision, Mrs. Wilson? Sophia asked gently as I signed the final authorization. I wish I did not have to make it, I answered honestly. But yes, I am sure. My grandchildren will still have funds for their education, just not the excessive amounts I had originally planned. And I will have the security I need for my remaining years. Sophia nodded, understanding in her eyes. Family dynamics can be complicated. I hope this brings you some peace. As I left the bank, I felt lighter somehow, as if I had set down a heavy burden I had been carrying. The money that had been meant as a gift of love had become a symbol of a one-sided relationship where my contributions were valued, but my presence was not. By reclaiming most of those funds, I was also reclaiming my self-respect. At home, I sat at my desk and wrote a letter to Melissa, explaining my decision. I detailed how much I had set aside for each child in the new restricted educational trusts and how the remainder had been redirected to secure my own future. I explained that this decision was not made in anger or as punishment, but as a necessary boundary in a relationship that had become unhealthy and one-sided. I wrote about my love for her and my grandchildren, a love that remained unchanged despite recent events. I expressed hope that someday we might rebuild our relationship on a foundation of mutual respect rather than financial obligation. I ended the letter with an invitation for open dialogue, whenever she was ready, making it clear that while my money was no longer unconditionally available, my heart remained open to reconciliation. After sealing the letter, I decided not to send it immediately. I needed time to strengthen my own support network, first, knowing that the reaction to my decision would likely be intense and potentially hostile. I spent the week reconnecting with friends I had neglected while prioritizing Melissa's family. I called my book club members and rejoined their monthly meetings after a long absence. I reached out to former colleagues from the school district, arranging a lunch gathering to catch up. I also began rediscovering interests and passions I had set aside. I registered for a watercolor painting class at the community center, something I had always wanted to try but never made time for. I volunteered at the local library's literacy program, using my teaching skills to help adults learning to read. Each activity reinforced that I had value beyond my role as a mother and grandmother, that I had an identity worth protecting and nurturing. The call from Brian came exactly 1 week after I had closed the accounts. It was a Thursday evening, and I had just returned from my painting class, feeling peaceful and accomplished with my first completed landscape drying on the dining room table. "What the hell do you think you are doing?" he demanded, without preamble, when I answered the phone. "The bank called about unusual activity on the accounts. They are empty, Jennifer. Where is the money?" I had prepared for this conversation, rehearsing calm responses to the anger I knew would come. "Hello, Brian. Yes, I have made changes to the financial arrangements I had previously established." "Changes? You have stolen money that was promised to my children." His voice rose with each word. "Do you have any idea how this makes us look? We have already told the Westfield board about the substantial college funds in place." It was telling that his first concern was appearance rather than actual impact. "The money was never promised to anyone, Brian. Those accounts were always in my name, established with my funds, with the intention of helping with educational expenses." "We will sue you," he threatened. "This is a breach of verbal contract. Our lawyer will be contacting you tomorrow. You are welcome to pursue legal action if you believe that is appropriate." I replied, my voice steady, despite my racing heart. "However, I have confirmed with financial and legal advisors that these funds were always legally mine to control." "You vindictive old woman," he hissed. "Is this because of what I said at dinner? Are you really so petty that you would punish innocent children because your feelings were hurt?" "I have established new smaller trusts that will provide for Emma and Ethan's basic educational needs," I explained. "The remainder has been redirected to secure my own future." "This is not punishment, Brian. It is a recognition that our family relationship has fundamentally changed." He continued to rage for several more minutes before ending with a final threat. "You will regret this decision. You have no idea who you are dealing with." The line went dead. Less than an hour later, Melissa called. Her approach was different, but equally difficult to bear. She alternated between tearful pleas and sharp accusations. "How could you do this to us, Mom?" she cried. "We were counting on that money. The children's futures depended on it." "The children will still have funds for college," I assured her, "just not the excessive amounts I had originally set aside." "But we had plans," she insisted. "Brian has been making financial decisions based on those funds being available." This admission troubled me deeply. "Melissa, those accounts were never meant to fund your current lifestyle or Brian's business ventures. They were specifically for Emma and Ethan's education years in the future. "You have no idea how hard this is going to make things for me," she said, her voice hardening. "Brian is furious. He says this proves everything he said about you being unsuitable for our social circle." "Is that really what matters to you now, Melissa? Your social circle? What about our relationship as mother and daughter? What about the values I raised you with?" The conversation revealed the true depth of the rift between us. Melissa seemed unable to separate her identity from Brian's ambitions. Every concern she expressed related to appearances, implications for their social standing, or Brian's disappointment. Not once did she acknowledge how deeply I had been hurt by their treatment of me. "If you ever want to have a relationship with your grandchildren again, you will reverse this decision," she said finally, an ultimatum that broke my heart. "I will always want a relationship with Emma and Ethan," I replied. "But it cannot be a relationship based on financial manipulation. When you are ready to rebuild our connection based on love and mutual respect, I will be here." After that conversation, there was silence from their household. A week later, I received a formal letter from an attorney demanding the reinstatement of the funds. My own attorney, recommended by James, responded with a brief factual explanation of the legal status of the accounts and the new trusts established for the children's education. I learned from mutual acquaintances that Brian had begun a campaign to portray me as mentally unstable and vindictive. He told friends and associates that I had stolen money from my own grandchildren out of jealousy over their success. Some people who did not know me well enough to question this narrative began treating me differently. I received concerned calls from distant relatives asking about my mental health and decision-making capacity. Rather than engaging in a public battle of accusations, I chose to step back. I focused on strengthening relationships with those who knew my character and understood that I would never act out of spite, especially toward my grandchildren. I continued my volunteer work, my painting classes, and building a life that was fulfilling on its own terms. For nearly a month, I had no contact with Melissa or the children. Then, unexpectedly, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. When I answered, I heard Ethan's voice, small and secretive. "Grandma, it is me. I am using my friend Jake's phone." My heart leapt at the sound of his voice. "Ethan, oh sweetheart, it is so good to hear from you. Are you okay?" "I guess so," he said uncertainly. "Dad says you took all our college money because you are mad at him. Is that true?" The innocence of his question broke my heart. "No, sweetheart, that is not what happened. I still have money saved for your college. It is just a smaller amount now, and it is in a special account that can only be used for your education. Dad says we cannot see you anymore because you betrayed us," he continued, his voice wobbling. "Emma cries at night sometimes. She misses you." I had to blink back tears. "I miss you both so much. I would never betray you, Ethan. Sometimes adults have disagreements about important things, but my love for you and Emma never changes." "Why cannot we just go back to how things were?" before he asked plaintively. "When we used to come to your house and make cookies, and you would help me with my science projects." "I wish we could, sweetheart. I hope someday things will get better. Until then, know that I love you and Emma very much, and I think about you every single day." I heard a voice in the background calling Ethan's name, and he quickly whispered, "I have to go. Dad cannot know I called you." The line went dead, leaving me holding the phone and fighting back tears. That call confirmed what I had suspected. Brian and Melissa were misrepresenting my actions to the children, portraying me as the villain rather than explaining the complex adult issues at play. This realization strengthened my resolve to find a way back into my grandchildren's lives, not through financial leverage, but through genuine connection and love. 2 months after the dinner that had changed everything, I saw a flyer at the community center advertising the spring play at Emma's school. Though I had not been formally invited, I decided to attend. I dressed simply but elegantly, purchased a small bouquet of flowers, and arrived at the school auditorium with both apprehension and hope in my heart. I sat near the back, scanning the crowd for Brian and Melissa, but not seeing them yet. The play was a musical adaptation of Alice in Wonderland, and when Emma appeared on stage as Alice, my heart swelled with pride. She performed beautifully, her clear voice and natural grace captivating the audience. Throughout her performance, I could see the authentic joy on her face that had been missing during that formal dinner at their home. After the show, I made my way backstage, using my former educator credentials to gain access. Emma saw me before I saw her, and her squeal of delight drew everyone's attention as she ran toward me still in her costume. "Grandma! You came!" she cried, throwing her arms around my waist. Ethan, who had been waiting backstage with his parents, spotted me and ran over as well, joining the embrace. Over their shoulders, I saw Melissa, approaching, her expression a mixture of surprise and anger. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "I came to see my granddaughter perform," I said simply. "She was wonderful." Before Melissa could respond, Brian appeared, his face darkening when he saw me. "This is inappropriate, Jennifer. You were not invited." Emma pulled back from our hug, looking confused. "But Dad, I told you I wanted to invite Grandma. You said you would send her a ticket." The honesty of children can be so revealing. Brian's face flushed as nearby parents turned to observe the uncomfortable scene. "This is not the place for this discussion," he said tightly. "We will talk in private." Surprisingly, it was Melissa who spoke next. "Emma, Ethan, go change out of your costume and collect your things. We will meet you at the car." Once the children were out of earshot, she turned to me. "Can we talk outside? Just us." Brian started to object, but Melissa cut him off with a firm, "I need to speak with my mother alone, Brian." It was the first time in years I had seen her contradict him directly, and his surprised expression mirrored my own. Melissa and I walked to a quiet corner of the school garden. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. Then she sighed deeply. "The children have been miserable, Mom. They do not understand why they cannot see you. They keep asking questions we cannot answer, without admitting things we are not proud of." "I never wanted to come between you and your children," I said gently. "That was never my intention in any of this." "I know," she admitted, looking down at her hands. "Brian has been difficult since you redirected the college funds. It forced us to reconsider some financial decisions we had made. It also made me start questioning other things." "What things?" I asked, hardly daring to hope this might be a turning point. Whether all of this, she gestured vaguely at her designer outfit and the luxury car visible in the parking lot, is really making any of us happy. The children hate their new school. I barely recognize my own life anymore. And I miss my mother. Tears filled my eyes at this admission. "I have missed you too, sweetheart, so much." "I cannot promise things will change overnight," she continued. "Brian is still very angry and we have commitments we cannot simply walk away from. But I want to start rebuilding our relationship for the children's sake and for mine." This conversation marked the beginning of a slow, sometimes painful reconciliation process. Melissa arranged supervised visits with the children, initially at neutral locations like parks or restaurants. Brian remained cold and distant during these early encounters, but I focused on rebuilding my connection with Emma and Ethan rather than trying to win his approval. After several successful visits, I made a decision about the college funds. I contacted my attorney and financial advisor to establish formal educational trusts for Emma and Ethan. These trusts came with specific conditions. The funds could only be accessed for verified educational expenses, and the family had to participate in regular counseling sessions to address the unhealthy dynamics that had developed. When I presented this proposal to Melissa, she agreed immediately. Brian was more resistant, viewing the counseling requirement as an intrusion. But the financial reality of their situation, which had become more precarious than they had admitted, eventually led him to accept the terms. The family therapy sessions revealed issues deeper than I had imagined. Brian's obsession with social status stemmed from his own childhood in poverty, where he had been bullied and excluded because of his family's financial circumstances. His determination to give his children every advantage came from a place of fear rather than materialism. This understanding did not excuse his behavior toward me, but it helped me view him with more compassion. Melissa began taking small steps toward reclaiming her independence. She rejoined the environmental nonprofit board she had abandoned years ago. She started bringing the children to visit me without Brian, initially once a month, then more frequently. During these visits, we returned to our old traditions, baking cookies, working on art projects, and simply talking about their lives without the pressure of performance or appearance. As for me, the experience transformed my approach to family relationships and my own identity. I continued volunteering at the library's literacy program, finding deep satisfaction in helping others achieve their educational goals. I joined a support group for grandparents navigating complex family dynamics where I both received and offered guidance based on my experiences. Most importantly, I rebuilt my relationship with my grandchildren on a foundation of authentic values rather than financial support. Emma and I spent hours drawing together her artistic talent, blossoming when freed from the pressure of competitive activities. Ethan and I conducted science experiments in my kitchen and backyard, his natural curiosity thriving in an environment where questions were encouraged rather than scripted answers. The journey was not without setbacks. Brian occasionally reverted to his controlling behavior, especially during periods of professional stress. Melissa sometimes struggled to stand firm in her own values when faced with social pressure. The children had absorbed some materialistic attitudes that took time to unlearn. But the overall trajectory was toward healing and healthier family dynamics. The most profound lesson I learned through this experience was about the true meaning of family wealth. It is not measured in bank accounts or college funds in prestigious schools or exclusive neighborhoods. Real family wealth lies in relationships built on mutual respect and traditions that connect generations in the courage to stand up for your values, even when it costs you something. I also learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is to set boundaries that protect your own dignity. My decision to redirect those funds was not about punishment but about refusing to enable a value system that judged human worth by social status and material possessions. In standing up for myself, I ultimately helped my daughter begin to reclaim her own voice and values. 1 year after that painful dinner, we celebrated Thanksgiving at my house for the first time since Brian's promotion. The gathering was smaller and simpler than the elaborate catered events they had become accustomed to, but it felt more genuine. As I watched Emma help set the table with my mother's china and Ethan proudly carry in the pumpkin pie he had helped bake, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for this second chance at family connection. Have you ever had to make a difficult decision to protect your own dignity in a family relationship? Sometimes the hardest choices lead to unexpected healing. I would love to hear your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and subscribe to our channel for more authentic family stories. Share this video with someone who might need to hear that setting boundaries with love is sometimes the most powerful gift you can give yourself and others. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that true family wealth cannot be measured in dollars, but in respect, authenticity, and love.